Hello and welcome to Take the Stand Inclusive Leaders. I'm Dana Denis-Smith. I'm the founder and CEO of Obelisk Support, a legal services business, and the founder of the first 100 Years Project, which celebrates the achievements of women in law. I'm on a mission to make the legal sector a more inclusive place, and so I invited legal industry leaders who also care about inclusivity to have a conversation with me. This episode, I'm talking to Zeno Capucci, General Counsel at DocPlanner Group, a digital health platform. Welcome, Zeno.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here. And thank you for all the work you're doing for the legal community in respect of diversity and inclusivity. It's amazing.
Oh, thank you. It's great to have you here. I'm really excited to hear your insights and thoughts about our topic today. So the first question I ask all of my guests is, what does inclusive leadership mean to you?
It's an excellent question because it indeed can mean so many different things. And it's unfortunately probably a concept that has been overly politicized over the last few years. To me, inclusive leadership overall means fostering an environment and looking for personal and cultural value add rather than personal and cultural fit within an organization. So looking for different perspective that can take an organization, a business, a company like DocPlanner, for example, into a direction of it being more in tune with a wide array of stakeholders, clients, employees, investors, anyone who benefits from the planner services, their different perspectives. So for me, at the end of the day, inclusivity means a company going deliberately towards a direction of embracing different points of view.
Well, that's brilliant because my next question is going a little deeper. I'm curious about what you think are the, let's say, 2 to 3 top qualities that make an inclusive leader.
Awareness as a general quality and decline in different ways is probably a must have for inclusive leaders. And I mean self awareness in the first place. So understanding that we're all coming from different backgrounds, perspectives. We have our own inherent biases. We think in our mind that something is wrong and something is right. But that doesn't mean that is the only way. And so only if we're self-aware and we're aware of the way we think and the way we operate and the fact that this is an outcome of our background and our experiences, very personal experiences in life and not necessarily the truth or the right way of going about it. Only if we get to that point, I think we can truly be inclusive in listening to others. So that's the first type of awareness. And I would say, secondly, cultural awareness. So being aware of the fact that different cultures, different people, different contexts behave in different ways. So if we know that we come from a certain perspective, then other people as well may come from a different perspective and may be influenced by the way they grew up, the way they were taught at school, they were educated by their own families, or simply the companies they've been working for before. I think that's the second step. And then the third type of awareness is probably awareness of change. So awareness of the fact that the world around us, within our organization, outside of our organization, in society at large, is subject to constant change. And if we don't realize it, we're probably uh, doing a disservice to ourselves and to the organizations we serve, because unless we recognize that everything is subject to change, we won't really recognize the need for us to embrace an inclusive way of leading teams, of leading organization, of leading companies.
I love the ultra. That's such a great way to put it, actually. And this kind of, understanding the context, I'm a big believer of that. So I kind of want to ask you then next, if you can give us an example of your leadership style in practice, in the context in which you operate, or today or in the past.
Yes, at DocPlanner and specifically within the legal team at DocPlanner, we have a very diverse legal team of people of different genders, different backgrounds, different nationalities. We live in very different countries. And we try and learn from each other and from everyone's way of doing things in at every occasion we can. So one of the initiatives that we put together within the DocPlanner legal team is to ensure that people from different backgrounds in different countries also lead on projects that are not strictly related to their own country, the jurisdiction they operate in. So to give you an example, we have Brazilian lawyers, working on projects that have an impact in Europe or that originate from Europe. And in the same way, we have European lawyers doing the same with Turkey or doing the same with Mexico, Colombia, or Peru. So we try and shift the approach from you're qualified in that jurisdiction, therefore you're the only one who can lead a project in that jurisdiction into a more inclusive approach, obviously being conscious of the fact that there always needs to be compliance with local law and local custom. But limiting counsel within an individual country, within a specific country, to then advise only on matters of the country, I think just fosters a siloed type of culture that is not what we want. Outside of the legal team, I think what we're trying to do at DocPlanner is to create an environment where there is more open dialogue among leaders within the organization. We still have a lot of progress to make in terms of DocPlanner leadership team in making it become a wider and more diverse cohorts with individuals from different backgrounds, different genders, different points of view as well. One practical way we've done that recently is to deliberately invite open discussions within what we call mission control meetings within the organization. So what we normally call committees. So actually inviting people to raise their hands and say openly what they think the trajectory of the company should be going forward within that specific team, and raising any questions they may have, rather than having a top-down approach whereby the top leaders, the CEO, the COO, just decide what the agenda should be. So these are small steps, but I think they go towards a culture where everyone's input is valued in the same way.
That's great. It's great to hear about the voices of everybody being heard. I want to ask you a little bit next about very often when I speak to leaders, they talk about experiences they had in the past that made them the leader they are today. So I was wondering whether you can share with us an experience of inclusive leadership that influenced your career journey and why it mattered so much to you, to who you became today.
I started my foray into scale-up companies and venture capital-backed companies, working for an organization now called Zept, used to be called Woodrimi, that was led by a brilliant founder. His name is Ismail Ahmed, who has an incredible personal history. I recommend everyone who's listening to go and look it up. He's a refugee originally from Somaliland, who's then been a whistleblower for the United Nations, and such a great example of putting your true beliefs at the heart of an organization and using your experience, personal experience, and your professional experience to turn those values into a reality, into an organization that actually change the world for the better. So what Remit does basically is enabling migrants to send money to their families back home, back where they come from, at cheaper rates versus incumbent players. So from that perspective, having that example of a person that came to the UK without being from the UK, started a company coming from that background to serve a migrant community, and surrounded himself with a very diverse type of leadership, not the usual leaders that you would see in a UK financial institution. I think for me that was incredibly inspiring, and I realized that the reason why Woodrimi was such a nice company to work for and such a nice place to be and such a successful organization when I joined was vastly due to the influence that Ishmael had on the organization. So that stuck with me, and that contributed to forge the type of leader I want to be today, and I hopefully am most of the times.
Thank you. That's great. What do you think? I mean, we talk about the legal sector, you know, and obviously you're in the sector that your business operates, but especially in technology companies that are quite male dominated. But what do you think is the biggest barrier to inclusion?
The biggest barrier is probably, well, it's twofold. So allow me to answer your question with two answers. I think one is definitely ideological, and I think going back to the point I mentioned before, that's the part that saddens me the most. I think exclusivity, as many other concepts recently, has been politicized. So there's a tendency to see everything as black or white, anything to be perceived as right or wrong. And to me, it's neither of those. I mean, it requires on the one side an understanding that inclusivity and inclusive leadership should not mean sacrificing business interest in the name of values that people may or may not align themselves with. Is something that should enrich and does enrich a company's decision-making process, and therefore makes the company more successful. Again, because it makes the company more in tune with the wide array of stakeholders that the company has. There's very few companies, certainly not DocPlanner, that only deal with a specific segment of people in terms of clients, in terms of employees, in terms of stakeholders at large. So realizing that inclusivity doesn't mean pushing an agenda, a political agenda, but it means doing something in the interest of the organization on the one side. And on the other side, recognizing that resistance to inclusivity means resistance to change. And resistance to change is natural, is difficult to overcome. And someone who's resistant to change is not necessarily the enemy, but it's just someone with a different perspective that needs to be invited to the table and needs to have an opportunity to foster some dialogue a lot about what their beliefs are and why they may be resistant to the change. I think that's incredibly important. Otherwise, the objection that inclusivity is an agenda, is a political agenda of some sort, will be almost corroborated by the attitude of people who almost make it an agenda, right? So I think we need to be very careful as how we frame the discussion. It cannot be a discussion based on political ideas. It is a discussion based on what's good for an organization operating in 2024 in the world we live in. So that's the first one, and probably the major one. The second one, I think, is just a matter of again, people are resistant to change sometimes because sticking to the way you've always operated is not necessarily the right way, but it's the easy way. We'll call it the lazy way, but sometimes, let's just be honest, like we're very busy and it's difficult to embrace a way of doing things that you've never tried before, or that you've tried but not in the right context and never necessarily worked the first time around. So we need to enable leaders to be able to embrace inclusivity if inclusivity is not the status quo, and to have a little bit of patience and to have and to give them a little bit of support. It's not the easy way, it's not the quick way most of the times, unless you're in an organization that fosters it already, but you can reap the rewards further down the line. And I think just acknowledging that at the beginning it would take a little bit more effort is something that could go a long way in helping companies, leaders embrace inclusivity as a value.
I love this because actually it takes us to the next question, and this kind of, taking the lazy or easy route is not necessarily an option, especially in a competitive environment like we have at the moment. I mean, the economy is not at its best, so we have to be at our best to win, right? What do you think we should be doing to improve inclusive leadership?
There's a two-pronged answer to this. I think from a company and organizational perspective, again, we should dial back the heat of the dialogue that sometimes is heard within society and just focus on what are the practical advantages that my organization could get from embracing a more inclusive leadership style. What are examples from other organizations, for example, that we can use in showing that embracing this path, taking decisions by taking into account a wider number of perspectives is the right way to go. And I think there's plenty of examples out there of big organizations that all of a sudden have decided to stop doing things exactly in the way they were doing them. They pivoted for one reason or the other, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes out of opportunism, sometimes out of a conscious choice, and they made it successful. And so I think sharing these success stories among leaders is definitely one thing that could help, even within organization, drawing from our own experiences from previous workplaces and with leaders from other organizations. And I think the second answer, unfortunately, is regulation, not because I'm a big fan of regulation driving change, but I think regulation needs to support change. And depending on the countries, depending on the markets we operate in, we see that sometimes embracing inclusive choices does have a business cost simply because the legislation is not there to support the inclusive decision. To give you an example, paternity and maternity leave have a huge impact on the ability of employees within an organization to go through the ranks and become leaders within that organization. It is a reality that in some countries, granting equal paternity leave paternity leave that is equal to the maternity leave that is statutorily required under that country is expensive for a business, and not all businesses may be able to afford it. So unless regulation comes in that empowers businesses who decide to go down that route to do so efficiently, I think is always going to be a uphill battle. So we'll need support from our legislators and regulators to really shift the dial and move things forward in this respect, I think.
It's a great way to put it. It's kind of self-regulate and regulate all at the same time. But definitely, I mean, that's kind of what I'm hoping to achieve with these conversations, to help other leaders who maybe don't know or think it's difficult to do, to be inspired by leaders who are thinking about these questions, you know, and thinking about it already creates the awareness, doesn't it? And so my next question really is, what is the one question you should ask yourself if you want to be more inclusive?
Am I taking my decision? Am I behaving within my organization in a certain way just because that's, again, the lazy, the easy way, the way I've always been, the way we've always been doing things, influenced by my background? Or am I taking decision in a certain way because I truly have the interest of the organization at heart? And I think if you can honestly answer that question to yourself, and you are open to the answer sometimes being, maybe the reason why I'm doing certain things is because the way I'm used to, but from an outsider perspective, it wouldn't be the right direction. Maybe that's when you will realize that a different perspective, even one that seems a little bit more uncomfortable, is the right one. And at the end of the day, challenges are not meant to be comfortable. So if you really want to challenge yourself and your organization to reach new heights, going down the comfortable route 100% of the time is probably not the right way of looking at things.
Well, we've reached the end of my questions, so I only have one final question for you. I again ask all of my guests. You've kind of alluded to somebody that inspired you to be a more inclusive leader, but I would like you to look for another example. So I wanted to ask you, who is your inclusive leadership role model and why? It can be anyone and doesn't need to be somebody who you've met. It could just be somebody that inspires you to make you think about these bigger questions. And anyway, so take your time.
To me, the answer so far has always been the same. So one of my good friends, and I'm honored to be able to call her a friend, is Preeti Shetty. She is the founder of an organization called Upshot. Is an organization that is a charitable company, CIC, that focuses on measuring the impact of initiatives within the sports industry on the communities where those initiatives are implemented. She's also a board director, a member of the board of Brentford Football Club in the Premier League, and she was selected to be there because Brentford has been very progressive in deciding that football and sports in general is probably a sector where more diversity of perspective, more inclusivity is needed. And alongside all of this, she started so many inspiring initiatives in terms of inclusivity within the world of sports, which is not the sector I'm working in, but is together probably with technology and finance, one of the sectors, especially within football, where inclusivity, diversity of perspective probably needs some development at this stage. So for me, her whole career trajectory and what she stands for with a person and with a professional appointment so far is a constant inspiration. So kudos to Preeti if she ever listens to this conversation, and thank her for and thanking her for all the inspiration she gives me on a daily basis.
Well, brilliant example. I think we definitely didn't have a sport example before, I don't think. So that's great to include everybody in all the sectors. Thank you very much for joining me, Zeno, and for sharing your insights and thoughts around this topic. I'm really grateful you made the time to be here today.
Thank you. I'm really grateful for you making the time to speak to me today. Thank you again for everything you're doing for the legal sector and beyond, and speak soon.
I hope you found this conversation interesting and useful, and it's given you plenty of ideas for making your workplace, your team, and your organization more inclusive. To find more conversations on inclusivity, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, Obelisk Support, or connect with me on LinkedIn by searching Dana Denis-Smith and heading to my videos section. If you have any questions or feedback, I'd love to hear from you. You can get in touch by email, d.denis-smith@obelisksupport.com. Thank you for watching us and for listening to Take the Stand Inclusive Leaders, and see you next time.